His heart had stopped for 23 minutes, and then it started beating again. 15 years as a paramedic, and I thought I knew the difference between hope and impossibility. I thought I understood the limits of medicine, the boundaries of what's possible. But on one October night in Chicago, I witnessed something that still moves me every single day. My name is Michael Torres, and I've been an emergency paramedic in Chicago for over 15 years. I thought I had seen everything. Car crashes that defy physics, overdoses that should have been fatal but weren't. Heart attacks in 20-year-olds, miracles in 90-year-olds. After thousands of calls, hundreds of saves, and more losses than I care to count, I believed I was unshakable. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday night in late October. I remember because the leaves were just starting to turn, and there was that crisp bite in the air that tells you winter's coming fast. My partner Jake and I had already run 6 calls that shift. Nothing too crazy. A minor fender bender on Lakeshore Drive, an elderly woman with chest pains who turned out to have severe indigestion, a construction worker who'd sliced his hand open and needed stitches. We were grabbing coffee at 11:30 at night when the radio crackled to life. Unit 47, respond code 3 to 1847 North Wells Street. 42-year-old male, cardiac arrest, CPR in progress. Jake looked at me over his steaming cup. We'd been partners for 3 years, and I could read his thoughts like a book. Cardiac arrest calls at that hour were never good. Family members trying CPR rarely knew what they were doing. By the time we arrived, it was usually too late. But this call felt different from the moment we got it. I can't explain why. Maybe it was the way the dispatcher's voice trembled slightly when she said, CPR in progress. Maybe it was the weird feeling I got in my stomach. Not the usual pre-call adrenaline, but something else. Something that made my hands shake as I grabbed the radio. Unit 47 responding, I said into the handset. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. The drive to North Wells Street should have taken 12 minutes. We made it in 8, sirens wailing through the mostly empty streets of Lincoln Park. Jake was quiet, which was unusual. Normally he'd be cracking jokes or talking about his weekend plans. But tonight, he just gripped the steering wheel and stared ahead into the darkness. As we turned onto North Wells, I saw the house immediately. It was a beautiful brownstone, the kind that screams, successful family, with its perfectly manicured front yard and warm lights glowing in every window. But tonight, those lights seemed different, desperate, like they were screaming for help. A woman burst out of the front door before we'd even stopped the ambulance. She was maybe 40. With shoulder-length brown hair that looked like she'd been running her hands through it. Her face was streaked with tears, and she was wearing what looked like pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat. Please, she called out as we jumped from the rig, medical bags in hand. Please, you have to save him. He just collapsed. 1 minute we were watching TV and the next... Her voice broke, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. That's when I heard it. The sound that every paramedic dreads. The rhythmic thumping of someone doing chest compressions, echoing from inside the house. But there was something else in that sound. A desperation. A refusal to give up that cut right through me. Ma'am, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, I said, as we hurried up the front steps. My training kicked in, but underneath the professional calm, that strange feeling in my stomach was growing stronger. David, my husband, he was laughing at something on TV. Then he grabbed his chest and fell over. I called 911 and started CPR like they taught us in that class we took last. She was talking fast, stumbling over her words. But he's not responding. He's not breathing. Oh God, please don't let him die. We pushed through the front door into a living room that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Hardwood floors, expensive furniture, family photos covering every surface. But in the center of it all, the beautiful room had become a battlefield. A man lay on the floor next to an overturned coffee table. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair starting to go gray at the temples. He was wearing a Bulls t-shirt and jeans, and his face had that grayish-blue color that no paramedic ever wants to see. Kneeling beside him was a teenage girl, maybe 16, performing chest compressions with tears streaming down her face. "That's our daughter Emma," the woman said behind us. "She took CPR in school last month. She's been doing compressions for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. In cardiac arrest situations, every second counts. After 10 minutes without proper circulation, brain damage becomes almost inevitable. But something about this scene made me push that thought away. Emma looked up at us with eyes full of hope and terror. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, not stopping her compressions even as we knelt beside her. "Please tell me he's going to be okay." I wanted to give her hope. I wanted to tell her that everything would be fine. But 15 years of experience had taught me not to make promises I couldn't keep. Instead, I placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "You did great, honey. We'll take it from here." As Emma moved aside, I got my first close look at David. And that's when the strange feeling in my stomach exploded into something I'd never felt before. This wasn't just another cardiac arrest call. Something about this man, this family, this moment, told me that tonight was going to change everything I thought I knew about life and death. Jake was already setting up the monitor while I prepared to take over compressions. The room fell silent except for the sound of our equipment powering up and the quiet sobbing of a wife who might be about to lose everything. I looked at David's face one more time before beginning CPR, and I swear I felt something. A presence, a whisper, a certainty that this story was far from over. What happened next would challenge everything I believed about medicine, about science, and about the thin line between this world and whatever lies beyond it. I pressed my hands against David's chest and felt nothing. No pulse, no breath, no sign of life whatsoever. But something inside me refused to accept what my training was telling me. "Jake, get the defib ready," I called out, beginning chest compressions with a rhythm I'd performed thousands of times before. But this time felt different. This time, each compression felt like I was fighting against something bigger than cardiac arrest. The monitor came to life with its familiar beeping, and the screen showed exactly what I feared. A flat line. A systole. In the medical world, we call it the dead heart rhythm. No electrical activity, no hope. Emma had retreated to the corner of the room, her mother's arms wrapped around her shoulders. They were both crying, but trying to stay quiet, as if making noise might somehow make things worse. The father of this family, this man who probably coached Little League and helped with homework, was lying motionless while I pumped his chest with mechanical precision. "How long since he collapsed?" I asked, not breaking rhythm. 18 minutes now," his wife whispered. "Maybe 19. 18 minutes. In emergency medicine, we have a saying, time is muscle. Every minute without oxygen means more brain cells dying, more heart tissue becoming irreversibly damaged. After 10 minutes, the chances of meaningful recovery drop to almost nothing. After 15, you're basically looking at a miracle." We were well past miracle territory, but I kept going. Jake handed me the defibrillator pads, and I quickly placed them on David's chest. The machine analyzed his heart rhythm for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 seconds. "No shock advised," the mechanical voice announced. "Continue CPR." No shock advised meant there was no rhythm to shock back into place. His heart wasn't just beating wrong, it wasn't beating at all. "Jake, push 1 milligram of epinephrine," I ordered, never stopping compressions. Epinephrine, adrenaline, was our last-ditch effort to kickstart a heart that had given up. Sometimes it worked. Most of the time, it didn't. As Jake prepared the medication, I looked up at David's family. Emma was staring at me with eyes that held so much hope it physically hurt to see. Her mother was whispering something. A prayer, I realized. Over and over the same words. "Please God, please don't take him. Please don't take him." I've heard thousands of prayers in my career. Family members begging God, bargaining with the universe, making promises they'd probably never remember if their loved ones survived. But this prayer felt different. There was something in her voice. A certainty, a faith that cut through the clinical atmosphere of our resuscitation efforts like a blade. "Epinephrine's in," Jake announced. I continued compressions, counting under my breath. 30 compressions, then Jake would give 2 breaths through the bag mask. 30 more compressions. 2 more breaths. It was a dance we'd performed hundreds of times, usually without success in cases this far gone. 3 minutes passed, then 4, then 5. The monitor never wavered from that terrible flatline. Michael, Jake said quietly, using my first name instead of my last name, like he usually did during calls. That told me everything. Jake was thinking the same thing I was, that maybe it was time to call it. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not with Emma watching me with those eyes. Not with her mother's prayers filling the room like incense. Not with this strange feeling in my gut that kept growing stronger instead of fading away. Before I continue, tell me in the comments which city and country you're watching from. Stories like this one reach farther than you imagine. One more round, I told Jake. Push another epi. Jake nodded without question. That's what made him a great partner. He trusted my instincts even when they went against protocol. 22 minutes now. David's skin was getting grayer, his lips more blue. Everything medical science had taught me said we were performing CPR on someone who was already gone. But something deeper than science, something I couldn't name, told me to keep fighting. As Jake pushed the second dose of epinephrine, Emma suddenly stepped forward. Can I hold his hand? She asked in a voice so small I almost didn't hear her. I wanted to say no. I wanted to maintain the sterile environment we needed for resuscitation. But something about the way she asked, the desperate love in her voice, made me nod. Emma knelt beside her father and took his hand in both of hers. It was still warm from our efforts, but limp and lifeless. Daddy, she whispered. If you can hear me, we need you to fight. We need you to come back. Mom needs you. I need you. Her voice was breaking, but she kept talking. Remember when you taught me to ride my bike? You said I could do anything if I didn't give up. Well, I'm not giving up on you, so you can't give up either. I felt something shift in the room. Not medically, the monitor still showed that flat line, and David still showed no signs of life. But emotionally, spiritually, something changed. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy I'd never experienced in 15 years of emergency medicine. Daddy, please, Emma continued, squeezing his hand tighter. Please come back to us. 24 minutes. I was running out of medical options. More importantly, I was running out of time before brain death became irreversible. In a few more minutes, even if we got his heart beating again, he might never be the same David who laughed at TV shows and taught his daughter to ride bikes. But I kept going. Something told me this story wasn't over. Jake, prep for intubation, I said. Getting a breathing tube down his throat would give us better oxygen delivery than the bag mask. It was a long shot, but it was something. As Jake prepared the intubation equipment, David's wife moved closer. She knelt on the other side of her husband, opposite from Emma, and placed her hand on his forehead. David, she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it all night. I know you're in there somewhere. I know you can hear us. We're all here waiting for you. Your family is here. We love you. We need you. 25 minutes. The room fell silent except for the sound of my compressions and the steady beep of the monitor showing no electrical activity. Jake had the intubation tube ready, waiting for me to pause so he could insert it. That's when Emma said something that made everyone in the room freeze. Look at his hand. I glanced down while continuing compressions. David's hand, the one Emma was holding, had changed color slightly. Just slightly. Instead of the grayish blue it had been, there was a faint hint of pink returning to his fingertips. That's just from the compressions increasing circulation, Jake said quietly. But his voice didn't sound convinced. I felt David's neck for a pulse, something I'd been doing every few minutes with no success. Still nothing. But Emma was right. His color was improving. Just barely. 26 minutes. One more round of medications, I decided. Push another epi, and let's try some atropine. Atropine was a medication we used to speed up slow heart rhythms. It shouldn't have any effect on a heart with no rhythm at all. But something, instinct, desperation, or maybe divine inspiration, told me to try it. As Jake pushed the medications, Emma kept talking to her father, telling him about school, about her upcoming senior year, about the colleges she was applying to. Normal, everyday things that suddenly felt sacred in this room where we were fighting for a life. I got into Northwestern early admission, she told him, her voice thick with tears. I wanted to surprise you. I was going to tell you at dinner tomorrow night. But I need you to be there to hear it, Daddy. I need you to be proud of me. 27 minutes. I continued compressions, but something in the room had shifted again. The air felt electric, charged with possibility. David's color was definitely improving now. Too much to be explained by chest compressions alone. And that's when I felt it. Just the faintest flutter under my fingers as I checked for a pulse. So light I thought I'd imagined it. But Jake saw my expression change. "What is it?" he asked. I pressed my fingers more firmly against David's neck, hardly daring to breathe. There it was again. Weak, irregular, but unmistakable. A heartbeat. But what happened in the next 60 seconds would challenge everything I thought I knew about medicine, about life, and about the power of love to call someone back from the very edge of eternity. "Jake, stop what you're doing and check this pulse." My voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence of that living room, it sounded like thunder. Jake immediately moved to David's other side and placed his fingers on the carotid artery. His eyes went wide. "I feel it. It's weak, but it's there." Emma gasped, her grip on her father's hand tightening. "Does that mean—" "Don't get excited yet," I said, though my own heart was racing. "We need to see if it sustains." But even as I said those words, something extraordinary was happening. The monitor that had shown nothing but a flat line for 27 minutes suddenly displayed a blip, then another, small, irregular, barely there, but unmistakably electrical activity from a heart that had been completely silent. "That's impossible," Jake breathed, staring at the screen. I kept checking David's pulse while watching the monitor. The heartbeats were weak and far apart, maybe 20 beats per minute when a normal heart beats 70 to 80. But they were real. After 27 minutes of nothing, David's heart was trying to come back. His wife moved closer, her eyes fixed on the monitor screen. Is he going to be okay?" I wanted to give her hope, but 15 years of experience had taught me to be cautious. Sometimes hearts restart briefly only to stop again permanently. Sometimes the brain damage from oxygen deprivation is too severe for meaningful recovery. Sometimes what looks like a miracle turns out to be just a cruel delay of the inevitable. But this felt different. Everything about this call felt different. "We're seeing some heart activity," I told her carefully. "But we need to get him to the hospital immediately. His brain has been without adequate oxygen for almost 30 minutes. 30 minutes. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. In medical school, they teach you that brain death begins after 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. Permanent brain damage is almost certain after 10 minutes. What we were looking at should have been impossible. Yet David's heart kept beating. "Should we transport now?" Jake asked, already gathering our equipment. I nodded. But as I prepared to move David onto our stretcher, something made me pause. His color was continuing to improve. The grayish-blue pallor was fading, replaced by something that looked almost healthy. His lips, which had been blue just minutes before, were becoming pink again. "Emma, I need you and your mom to follow us to Chicago General," I said. "We'll take good care of him." But as I said those words, David's eyelids fluttered. Everyone in the room froze. "Did you see that?" Emma whispered. I had seen it, but eyelid movement could mean anything, or nothing. Sometimes it was just random muscle contractions as the brain struggled with oxygen deprivation. Then it happened again. A definite flutter, like someone trying to wake up from a deep sleep. "David," his wife called softly. "David, can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing. The room held its breath. Even the monitor seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Then, slowly, impossibly, David's eyes opened. Not the vacant stare of someone with severe brain damage. Not the confusion of someone emerging from unconsciousness. His eyes opened, focused, and looked directly at his wife with complete recognition and awareness. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice barely audible but completely lucid. I felt the hair on my arm stand up. In my entire career, I had never seen anything like this. People don't come back from 30 minutes of cardiac arrest with this level of neurological function. It simply doesn't happen. But it was happening. Sarah started crying. Not the desperate tears of grief I'd been watching for the past half hour, but tears of joy so pure they made my own eyes water. "Oh my God, David, "Oh my God, you're back." "Dad?" Emma's voice was trembling. "Daddy, are you really okay?" David turned his head slightly to look at his daughter. The movement was weak but deliberate, coordinated. "Emmy? What happened? Why does everyone look like they've seen a ghost?" Jake and I exchanged glances. David's mental status was remarkably clear for someone who had just experienced such prolonged cardiac arrest. He was oriented, recognizing his family, speaking in complete sentences. Medically speaking, this shouldn't have been possible. "You collapsed, sir," I explained, kneeling beside him. "Your heart stopped. We've been doing CPR for about 30 minutes. David looked confused. 30 minutes? That can't be right. I feel like I was watching TV with Sarah, and then... He paused, his expression changing to something I couldn't quite read. There was this bright light, and I felt so peaceful. But then I heard Emma calling me, and I knew I had to come back. The room fell completely silent. Even the monitor seemed quieter, though David's heart rhythm was steadily strengthening on the screen. "You heard Emma calling you?" Sarah asked. It was like she was far away, but I could hear her voice so clearly. She was telling me not to give up, that she needed me to come back. And I realized I wasn't ready to go. David's voice was getting stronger with each word he spoke. "I wasn't ready to leave you and Emmy." I checked his pulse again. It was stronger now, more regular. His color was almost normal. The transformation was so dramatic that if I hadn't witnessed it myself, I would never have believed it. "We still need to get you to the hospital," I told him. "Your heart stopped for a long time. We need to make sure there's no damage." As Jake and I prepared to move David onto our stretcher, his wife grabbed my arm. "Is this normal? Do people usually recover this quickly after what happened?" I wanted to give her a medical explanation, something about the resilience of the human body or the effectiveness of modern resuscitation techniques. But the truth was, there was no medical explanation for what I was witnessing. "No," I said simply. "This is not normal. This is extraordinary." During the ambulance ride to Chicago General, David remained alert and conversational. His vital signs stabilized completely. His heart rhythm looked like that of a healthy 42-year-old man who had never experienced cardiac arrest at all. But it was what he told me during that ride that truly shook me to my core. "I need you to know," he said as we raced through the streets of Chicago with sirens blazing. I wasn't unconscious the whole time. I could hear everything. Emma talking to me, Sarah praying, you and your partner working on me. I wanted to respond, but it was like I was trapped somewhere else. "What do you mean, somewhere else?" David was quiet for a moment, looking out the ambulance window at the city lights streaming by. "It's hard to explain. I was in this place that was incredibly peaceful, incredibly bright. I felt no pain, no fear. And there were people there. People I recognize but haven't seen in years." "What kind of people?" "My father. He died 5 years ago from cancer. And my grandmother, who passed when I was 12. They looked exactly like I remembered them, but younger somehow, healthier." David's voice carried a certainty that made the hair on my neck stand up again. "They told me it wasn't my time, that Emma and Sarah still needed me." I've heard stories like this before. Near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, visions of deceased loved ones. As a paramedic, you hear a lot of things that are hard to explain medically. But usually, these stories come from people who were unconscious for a few minutes, not 30 minutes. And usually, those people don't recover with such remarkable neurological function. "My father told me something," David continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "He said that sometimes, when love is strong enough, when faith is pure enough, heaven touches earth." He said this was one of those times. As we pulled into the emergency bay at Chicago General, I found myself believing every word David had told me. Not because it made medical sense, it didn't, but because I had witnessed something in that living room that went beyond medicine, beyond science, beyond everything I thought I understood about life and death. The emergency department team was waiting for us, ready for a complicated cardiac arrest patient. But as we wheeled David in, he was sitting up on the stretcher, holding Sarah's hand and talking to Emma about her college acceptance. The ER doctor took one look at him and then looked at me with confusion. This is your 30-minute arrest? Before I could answer, David spoke up. Doctor, I know this sounds crazy, but I feel completely fine. Better than fine, actually. I feel like I've been given a gift. And that's when I realized that the gift wasn't just David's, it was all of ours. We had all witnessed something that would change how we saw life, death, and the mysterious space between them forever. But what the tests would reveal in the coming hours would challenge everything the medical team thought they knew about cardiac arrest, brain function, and the power of something far greater than human understanding. Dr. Jennifer Martinez had been working emergency medicine for 12 years. She'd seen everything from multiple trauma victims to mysterious illnesses that defied diagnosis. But when she walked into Trauma Bay 3 and saw David sitting up, alert, and chatting with his family, her expression told me she'd never seen anything like this. "Run this by me again," she said, pulling me aside while the nurses began their initial assessment. "This is the patient who was in cardiac arrest for 30 minutes? A systole for 27 minutes? Then irregular heartbeat that strengthened progressively," I confirmed. "No pulse, no breathing, no response to standard resuscitation protocols until the very end." Dr. Martinez looked back at David, who was now laughing at something Emma had said. His color was perfect. His speech was clear and animated. His movements were coordinated and purposeful. "And he's been lucid since regaining consciousness?" "Completely lucid. Oriented to person, place, and time. No confusion, no neurological deficits that I can observe." I paused, then added, "Doctor, in 15 years I've never seen anything like this." She nodded slowly, then walked over to David's bedside. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Dr. Martinez. I understand you've had quite an ordeal tonight." "That's what everyone keeps telling me," David replied with a smile that seemed to light up the entire trauma bay. "But honestly, I feel incredible. I know that probably sounds strange given what happened, but I've never felt more alive in my life." Dr. Martinez began her neurological examination, testing David's reflexes, coordination, and cognitive function. Everything was not just normal, it was perfect. His responses were quick, his reasoning sharp, his memory intact. She tested his ability to recall recent events, to perform simple calculations, to follow complex instructions. David passed every test flawlessly. "This is remarkable," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "We need to run some tests. EKG, chest X-ray, CT scan of your brain, blood work. After what you've been through, we need to make sure there's no underlying damage." As the medical team began their workup, I stayed nearby, unable to shake the feeling that this story was still unfolding. Sarah and Emma never left David's side, and I noticed something beautiful happening in that trauma bay. Other hospital staff, nurses, technicians, even doctors from other departments, kept finding excuses to walk by. Word was spreading about the patient who had come back from a 30-minute cardiac arrest with no apparent deficits. The first test results came back within an hour. Dr. Martinez approached me with David's EKG in her hand, her expression somewhere between amazement and disbelief. "His cardiac rhythm is completely normal," she said. "Not just stable, perfect. It's like he never had cardiac arrest at all." "What about the CT scan?" "That's what I can't understand. After 30 minutes without adequate oxygen, we should be seeing signs of cerebral edema, evidence of hypoxic brain injury. But his brain scan is completely normal. No swelling, no signs of damage, no abnormalities whatsoever." She showed me the images on her tablet. I'm not a radiologist, but even I could see that David's brain looked healthy, with clear, well-defined structures and no signs of the damage that prolonged oxygen deprivation typically causes. "The blood work is the same story," Dr. Martinez continued. "His cardiac enzymes show some elevation, which is consistent with the stress his heart went through, but everything else is within normal limits. His oxygen saturation is perfect, his electrolytes are balanced, his kidney and liver function are normal." As we talked, I noticed a commotion near David's bed. Emma was crying again, but these were tears of joy. She was showing her father something on her phone, photos from her high school graduation, her acceptance letter to Northwestern, moments from their life together that she thought he might never see again. "I kept all of these on my phone to show you when you woke up," she was telling him. The doctors said. They said you might not remember things, or that you might be different, but you're exactly the same. You're exactly my dad. David pulled his daughter close, and I watched as he whispered something in her ear that made her smile through her tears. In that moment, the clinical atmosphere of the trauma bay transformed into something sacred. This wasn't just a medical recovery. This was a family being restored. But it was what happened next that truly shook everyone in that hospital to their core. Doctor Martinez was reviewing David's chest x-ray with the radiologist when she called me over with an urgency I hadn't heard before. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the x-ray on the computer screen. "Do you see anything unusual about his heart?" I studied the image carefully. David's heart appeared normal in size and position. His lungs were clear. Everything looked exactly as it should. "I don't see any abnormalities," I admitted. "That's exactly the problem." Doctor Martinez zoomed in on the cardiac silhouette. This man supposedly suffered a massive cardiac event severe enough to cause 30 minutes of complete arrest, but there's no evidence of it anywhere. No enlarged heart, no fluid in the lungs, no signs of heart failure or damage. She pulled up his EKG again on another monitor. "Look at this rhythm. It's not just normal. It's textbook perfect. The intervals, the wave formations, the rate. Everything is ideal for a man his age." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that medically, what we're looking at is impossible. His heart shows no evidence of having experienced any trauma at all. It's like the cardiac arrest never happened, except we have your detailed documentation and the fact that he was clinically dead when you brought him in." As if summoned by our conversation, David's voice called out from across the trauma bay. "Dr. Martinez, could I speak with you for a moment?" We walked over to his bedside, where David was sitting up with an alertness that seemed to radiate energy. Sarah and Emma were beside him, both looking like they were still processing the miracle they had witnessed. "I wanted to thank you and your team for everything you're doing," David began, "but I also wanted to tell you something that might help you understand what happened tonight." Dr. Martinez nodded. "I'm listening. While I was away, I had what I guess you'd call a vision or an experience. I was in a place that was indescribably beautiful and peaceful. But more than that, I was completely whole there. I could feel that whatever was wrong with my heart, whatever caused it to stop, was healed in that place." The trauma bay had grown quiet. Even the usual hospital sounds seemed muted as David continued. "My father was there, and he told me something I'll never forget. He said that sometimes, when the love in this world is strong enough, heaven reaches down and fixes what's broken. He said that Emma's voice calling me back, Sarah's prayers, your efforts to save me, all of that love created a bridge that allowed healing to happen." Dr. Martinez was listening intently, her scientific mind clearly struggling with what she was hearing. "David, what you're describing it's not something we have medical explanations for." "I know," David replied with a gentle smile. "But doctor, you've seen my test results. You can't explain those medically either, can you?" She was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I can't. What I experienced wasn't just about me coming back," David continued. "It was about understanding that healing, real healing, isn't always medical. Sometimes it's spiritual. Sometimes it's about love being stronger than death, faith being more powerful than fear." As David spoke, I noticed that more hospital staff had gathered around the trauma bay. Nurses, orderlies, security guards, people who had heard about the miraculous recovery were drawn to witness something they sensed was extraordinary. Emma took her father's hand. "Dad, when we thought we were losing you, Mom and I prayed harder than we've ever prayed in our lives. We asked God to bring you back, and He did." "But it wasn't just God," Sarah added, looking directly at me and Jake, who had arrived to check on our patient. "It was you two refusing to give up when anyone else would have stopped trying. It was Emma doing CPR when I was too scared to think straight. It was all of us fighting together." That's when Jake, who had been quietly observing everything, spoke up with something I'd never heard in his voice before: wonder. "I've been a paramedic for 8 years, he said. "I've seen people come back from cardiac arrest before, but never like this. Never after this long, and never with this kind of complete recovery." He paused, looking around at the assembled crowd. I don't know what we witnessed tonight, but I know it wasn't just medicine. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. In medical school, they teach us that medicine is both an art and a science, but sometimes... She looked at David, then at his family, then at the impossible test results. Sometimes we encounter something that transcends both. Something that reminds us there are forces in this universe that we don't fully understand. As the evening wore on, David's condition remained remarkably stable. Every subsequent test confirmed what the first ones had shown: complete neurological function, perfect cardiac activity, no evidence of the trauma his body had supposedly endured. But more than his physical recovery, it was the transformation I saw in everyone who came into contact with David and his family that truly moved me. The cynical ER nurse who had seen everything found herself wiping away tears. The hardened security guard who usually kept his distance was asking David about his experience. The skeptical resident who prided himself on rational thinking was admitting that some things couldn't be explained by textbooks. By 2 o'clock in the morning, word of David's recovery had spread throughout Chicago General. Staff members from other floors were finding excuses to visit the ER. Everyone wanted to see the man who had come back from 30 minutes of cardiac arrest with no deficits, no damage, no explanation. And David, with his family beside him, welcomed each visitor with the same radiant smile, the same willingness to share his story, the same quiet certainty that he had been touched by something greater than human understanding. I know this sounds impossible, he told a group of medical students who had gathered around his bed. But I'm living proof that love can reach across the boundary between life and death, that faith can move mountains, even mountains of medical impossibility. As my shift ended and Jake and I prepared to leave, Dr. Martinez pulled me aside one more time. I've been practicing emergency medicine for over a decade, she said. I've seen miraculous recoveries before, but they always had medical explanations, even if we didn't understand them immediately. She gestured toward David's room. This is different. This is going to change how I practice medicine. But what she told me next would challenge everything I thought I knew about the intersection of science, faith, and the mysterious power that connects them all. Michael, Dr. Martinez said, her voice dropping to a whisper, I need to tell you something that's not going in any medical report, but something you need to hear as the paramedic who brought him back. I waited, sensing that whatever she was about to share would be as extraordinary as everything else I'd witnessed that night. About 20 minutes before you arrived with David, I lost a patient. An 18-year-old girl, motorcycle accident. We worked on her for over an hour. Everything we could possibly do, but we couldn't save her. Her eyes filled with tears. Her family was devastated. Her mother collapsed right there in the hallway, screaming that God had abandoned them. She paused, looking toward David's room where I could see him still surrounded by hospital staff, his family glowing with joy beside him. When you brought David in, when I saw what was impossible happening right before my eyes, I realized something. Maybe God didn't abandon that girl's family. Maybe he was preparing to show all of us, the staff who lost her, the family who was grieving, everyone who questioned their faith that night, that death doesn't always have the final word. The weight of her words hit me like a physical force. You think David's recovery was connected to losing her? I think, Dr. Martinez said carefully, that sometimes miracles happen not just for the person who receives them, but for everyone who witnesses them. That girl's family was here when David was brought in. They saw the impossible happen. They watched a man come back from death with perfect health, perfect memories, perfect love for his family. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Her mother stopped crying. She walked over to Sarah and said, If God can bring back your husband, maybe my daughter is somewhere beautiful too. For the first time since we lost her daughter, she smiled. I felt something shift inside my chest, an understanding that was bigger than medicine, bigger than one miraculous recovery. David's return wasn't just about David. It was about every person in that hospital who needed to see that love transcends death, that hope can emerge from the deepest despair, that sometimes the impossible happens exactly when we need it most. There's more, Dr. Martinez continued. The cardiac surgeon who was supposed to operate on David tomorrow morning? He was in the break room when word spread about the recovery. He's been struggling with doubt lately. Lost 3 patients in a row to complications that shouldn't have happened. He came down here, saw David, listened to his story. And he told me it reminded him why he became a doctor in the first place. Not just to fix hearts with scalpels and sutures, but to be part of something greater. The healing that happens when medicine and faith work together. As Jake and I finally prepared to leave Chicago General, David called us over to his bedside one more time. The trauma bay had quieted down, but the energy in the room still felt electric, charged with the aftermath of witnessing something that defied every law of medicine and physics. "I want you both to know," David said, gripping both our hands, "that what happened tonight wasn't just about me coming back. It was about showing everyone here that love is the strongest force in the universe. Stronger than death, stronger than fear, stronger than any medical textbook." Emma was curled up in the chair beside his bed, finally allowing herself to rest after hours of terrified vigilance. Sarah sat on his other side, her hand intertwined with his, occasionally touching his face as if to confirm he was really there. "The vision I had," David continued, his voice soft but clear. "My father told me something else. He said that Emma and Sarah's love created a rope that reached all the way to heaven. And your refusal to give up, your commitment to keep fighting for a stranger, that was part of the rope too." Jake, who rarely showed emotion during calls, wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "Sir, we were just doing our job." "No," David said firmly. "You were doing God's work. There's a difference." As we walked toward the ambulance in the pre-dawn darkness, Chicago looked different to me. The same streets, the same buildings, the same city lights, but somehow transformed by what I had witnessed. Every house we passed contained people who were loving each other, fighting for each other, refusing to give up on each other. And maybe, just maybe, some of those acts of love were strong enough to reach across the boundary between heaven and earth. "You know what the strangest part is?" Jake said as we drove back to our station. "What's that?" "I keep thinking about what David said, about hearing Emma's voice calling him back. All those times we've worked on people who didn't make it. I wondered if anyone was calling them back too. If love was fighting for them, even when we couldn't save them." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "Maybe that's what we do, Jake. Maybe every compression, every medication, every desperate attempt to restart a heart, maybe that's us adding our voices to the calling. Maybe that's how we help love fight death." 3 months later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Emma Thompson, postmarked from Northwestern University, where she had started her freshman year. "Dear Michael," it read, "I wanted you to know that my dad is doing wonderfully. His cardiologist says his heart is stronger now than it was before the cardiac arrest. He's become something of a local celebrity, speaking at churches, hospitals, and medical conferences about his experience. But more than that, our whole family is different now. We don't take a single day for granted. We tell each other, 'I love you' every morning and every night. We've started volunteering at the hospital where Dad was treated, sharing our story with other families who are facing their own medical crises. I'm studying pre-med now. I want to become a doctor, partly because of what I witnessed that night. I want to be part of the healing that happens when medical skill meets unshakable love. I also wanted you to know that Dad still talks about you and Jake constantly. He says you two were angels who refused to give up when giving up would have been easier. He says you taught him that sometimes God works through paramedics with tired hands and determined hearts." The letter concluded with something that brought tears to my eyes. "Dad always says that the miracle wasn't just that his heart started beating again. The miracle was that so many people, you, Jake, Dr. Martinez, the hospital staff, even strangers who heard our story, chose to believe that love is stronger than death. Thank you for being part of our miracle." That letter is framed on my wall now, right next to my paramedic certification. Every time I'm running a difficult call, every time I'm working on someone who seems too far gone, every time I'm tempted to think that medicine has limits that can't be transcended, I look at that letter. And I remember David Thompson. I remember that on a Tuesday night in October, I witnessed something that medical science couldn't explain, but the human heart understood perfectly. I remember that sometimes, when love is strong enough, when faith is deep enough, When people refuse to give up on each other, heaven touches earth. Some things belong not only to science, but to life and faith. 15 years as a paramedic, and I thought I knew the difference between hope and impossibility. I thought I understood the limits of medicine, the boundaries of what's possible. But David Thompson taught me that love doesn't recognize those boundaries. Love doesn't care about medical protocols or statistical probabilities or the limitations of human understanding. Love just keeps calling us back. That night changed how I practice emergency medicine. It changed how I see my patients, not just as medical cases, but as beloved sons and daughters, husbands and wives, parents and children, for whom someone, somewhere, is hoping and praying and refusing to give up. It changed how I see my role as a paramedic. I'm not just someone who provides advanced life support. I'm someone who gets to be part of the love that fights death. I'm someone who gets to add my voice to the calling that reaches across impossible distances to bring people home. And on the hardest calls, when everything medical science has taught me says there's no hope left, I remember David's words. Love is the strongest force in the universe. I remember that sometimes miracles happen. If this story touched you, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because stories like David's remind us that no matter where we are in the world, no matter what we're facing, we're not alone. Love is fighting for us. Hope is calling us back. And sometimes, just sometimes, heaven touches earth. You're not alone.